So I know I said I wouldn't see you guys again until the end of September, but then I read a book and it's the only fiction book I've given a full 5 stars to this year, so I had to talk about it, right? So today I'm going to go ahead and do a brief review, as brief as I can possibly be, of The Martian by Andy Weir. So as usual, I will go ahead and give a brief summary of the book. I will talk about my spoiler-free thoughts, give you a warning, and then go into my spoiler-filled thoughts. At this point, I'm not even gonna pretend that I have the summary even remotely memorized. At some point, that's a skill I'd like to challenge myself on more, but right now, just with the schedule that I have and the time that I have to write these scripts and look over them before I begin filming, I don't have time to really solidify it in my brain and just talk at the camera. So this is probably what it's going to be for the foreseeable future, at least. But I'm going to go ahead and read you the summary that I wrote for The Martian. Mark Watney is an astronaut and botanist on the Ares 3 team to Mars. When an unexpected storm hits the Martian surface, Watney is struck by debris and presumed dead. The rest of the Ares 3 team reluctantly evacuates, grieving both their mission and their friend. But Watney isn't dead, and now he is stranded on Mars with only the remaining supplies and his wits to aid in his survival. While The Martian is a gritty survival story, it is told through Watney's wonderfully sarcastic voice and is ultimately a testament to human ingenuity and the basic human desire to help each other. So before I even begin, it is worth saying that, like I said, I gave this book 5 stars, so every single category was a full star for me. So all of these categories I go into now are just going to be all the things that I want to say about the book, not really much critique. I will address some critiques that I have seen, but yeah, I loved this and I have 0 complaints. So this is basically just going to be me gushing about this book for the next however long it takes me to get through it. So as usual, I will go through my 5 categories, which are character, plot, writing style, setting and immersion, and pacing. So let's go ahead and start with character. I adore Mark Watney. He's one of my favorite protagonists I've come across in a long time. I told my husband that he actually reminds me a lot of Mark Watney, and he said, that's the biggest compliment you have ever given me. But it's more in the way of just there are a lot of qualities about Mark Watney's character that seem to overlap with qualities about my husband's character. I'm not romantically attached to Mark Watney, per se. I just think he's fantastic. He's a really wonderful narrator to follow, and it is so easy to have sympathy for him. It's easy to empathize with him. Not the whole being stuck on Mars part, but just a lot of the experiences that he's having, a lot of the feelings that he's feeling. It's very easy to have empathy for what he's going through. And he's entertaining. I think so often we see so many, dark and negative protagonists in more speculative fiction, and I love that he's just not that. He is playful, he's sarcastic, he's hopeful, he's smart. There's so many good qualities about him, and he's just like a straight up good dude, and I appreciate that. The story is told through both first and third person accounts, which I love those two working together. First person has grown on me. It used to not be my favorite perspective to be in, but I really appreciate it in certain formats when it's done really well. But in this story, you get both first and third person perspectives, and I love that because you have such a rich, diverse cast of characters, and you get a bird's eye view of them from all these different angles, and the way that he balances the first with the third person accounts just works really well and offers some great characterization. And the characters that you get to know are all likable to some degree. Even if you disagree with them, even if they're being stupid or frustrating, there's a level of humanness in each of these characters that it naturally garners sympathy for each of them. So it's well done in that you don't have this cast of characters where they're all too good to be true and that's why they're all likable, because then they wouldn't be likable. No matter which character you are following or looking at, there is some degree of connection that you can have with them because they are all so just human and it's so wonderfully done. I will say that this is the area that I have seen critiqued about Andy Weir's writing is his characterization. I think a lot of people have struggled with his narrators, and this is a point where I can see where they're coming from, but I have to disagree. I think it's actually one of the strongest points of his writing because he has characters that are so easy to root for. And probably the biggest reason I loved this book so much is because I loved Mark Watney. I just fell in love with his character, and I wanted to know what he was up to, and I wanted to see what was going to happen, and I wanted to hear what he was thinking. And so I can see where that criticism comes from, but I also disagree. I think it's one of the strongest points of this novel that I can recommend. Moving right on to plot. The plot is just so interesting. I've not seen anything like it before. Obviously, I think there are probably similar plots out there, but I am newer to the sci-fi genre in general, so this is new to me, at least. Because of the way that he sets the story up, it feels like each plot point is just very organic and interconnected. Every single single thing that he presents as a plot point seems to naturally evolve into the next one. And because all those elements are working together so well in the plot, it is especially compelling as a story. It's also just a neat idea and it's executed well. That is something that happens with books that I pick up all the time, is it has wonderful concept and just terrible execution. It's so disappointing when you pick up a book because the idea seems so interesting and then the story itself just falls flat. And I think it happens more often than people think it do. I don't know. There's just been a lot of books that I have picked up for that reason, because I think it sounds really interesting and then it just flops for me. But that is what made this book a gem for me, is that it's such an interesting and wonderful concept and it is executed very well. The plot is also both smart and entertaining, and I never felt that one of those elements was ever sacrificed for the other. And I'll get into that a little bit more with my thoughts about his writing style and the world building. But yeah, those are overall my plots on thought. I thought it was a fantastic plotline, thought it was really unique and interesting. It was executed super well. And again, it is the plot. There's so much going into it that compels you to read, but the concept and the plot really are a massive driving force within the novel itself. So moving on to writing style. Andy Weir has become an author that I really respect and admire. The only other book of his I have read is Project Hail Mary, and from what I understand, he only has like 3 or 4 novels out, so obviously I've already read like close to half of what he's written. But I read Project Hail Mary last year, also loved it, also gave it 5 stars, and then now with The Martian, there was just something about his work that lingers. It really sticks with me long after I put the book away, and it's something that I think about for a long time, and it just makes me feel good. Like, it's one of those things where Weir's voice really shines through, and it feels so uplifting even though the circumstances are really dire. So I really come to admire and respect him as an author, and obviously a lot of that comes from his style as a writer. And one of the things that I love best about his writing style is that it's so accessible. I have never been much of a science fiction gal because it's always been so difficult for me to follow. I have never been good at science. It's just something that does not naturally click for me. I have to work really hard to really understand what's being presented. So I never gravitated towards science fiction, and that's something that I've been gravitating more towards over the last couple years or so. I really like science fiction now, but I still have to kind of be choosy about what I pick up because a lot of it will just go over my head, unfortunately. I'm smart in some ways, but not in a science way. But that's what I love so much about Andy Weir as a writer, is that it is just so, that is his talent, is he puts these really, highbrow, complex scientific concepts into layman's terms. He writes in a way where even if you don't completely understand all the mechanics of what's going on, you get the gist and it's entertaining. So for people like me who just, science is not their thing and it doesn't click with them, I will say, a low caveat, I wish science was my thing. I think science is really fascinating and cool, and I just don't get it half the time. I wish I liked it more, but it's just, there's a barrier in understanding for me that, I don't know, maybe I could work through if I really put my mind to it, but I've always struggled with it. But anyway, that's besides the point. The point here is that I love being able to appreciate the science behind it, even if I don't completely grasp it, because of the way that he presents it. And it really does make it a book for everyone in that way, because even if you aren't a science person like me, you will still be able to basically understand what's going on and appreciate the story at hand. He's also got great dialogue. It can be a little corny and on the nose sometimes, but I think it works for the characters who are delivering the more corny, on the nose lines, and that's something that he does so well through his dialogue, is characterization, which sounds like it would be a given, but that's actually really hard to do. It is a feat to pull off when you can really identify character through who is speaking without any speech tags, and that's something that he manages to do really, really well through his dialogue. He's able to give so much character work, so much story through those conversations between characters, and it's just fun to read also. I really enjoy the dialogue in this book. And it's funny. This is another book, maybe I am more emotive as a reader than I previously thought, but it made me giggle throughout. I was always chuckling at something that was going on, and it was a delight to read. It was funny and it was fun. It's also very uplifting and hopeful in its own subtle way, and that is a testament to Weir's writing, because he's never beating you over the head with it, but it is there. He manages to present those elements in a very subtle way where it is clearly present throughout the novel, but again, he is not like putting it on a platter for you. You're like, here's the uplifting bit, here's the hopeful bit. It's just kind of sprinkled throughout, and it's weaved into every other element of the story that's at work. And again, because I am someone who gravitates towards fantasy and now more sci-fi, there's so much in epic storytelling that is just so dark and gritty, and I can appreciate that when it's there, but I feel like the genres are so saturated with it. The more that I find books like this that also manage to be lighthearted and to present hopefulness and optimism without dulling the stakes or the grittiness that is involved. My respect goes through the roof, and this was so present here. All right, moving on to setting and immersion. For someone who's never been to Mars, Andy Weir sure does a really good job of making me believe that we have been to the Martian surface and studied it. Again, with his background in science and the way that he looks at scientific fact to work his concepts, it really does feel very realized. It feels like the Martian landscape is something that we are intimately familiar with, that NASA has actually gone to see. So he does a wonderful job of presenting this planet as something that we understand even more than we do. And even the settings on Earth are immersive because the average reader isn't going to be somebody who is involved in NASA. So even those moments where you're at NASA headquarters or in similar organizations, that felt immersive because that is something that is entirely new to me. But again, it is presented in a way where you can kind of just slip right into the setting and feel like you are a part of it. And there's not really a lot of heavy lifting in the world building that needs to go on the reader's part, which is really nice. So setting and immersion, also fantastic. He does a wonderful job with that. And again, it's so believable because he's got the science down. I say knowing nothing about science. He convinced me, and from what I understand, it's all pretty accurate, and that's one of the things that he is praised for in his books, is that he is looking at scientific concepts and ideas that already exist and playing around with them, so these things really could be feasible, which is what makes it so cool. So yeah, it's also excellently done. Obviously, I gave it a full star here too. And then finally, moving on to pacing. This was the only element that I had a minor gripe with, but I couldn't even dock points here because that minor gripe was resolved within like 20 pages. It picked up so quickly. I can't really say too much without spoiling, but there was a piece at the beginning where I was like, is it going to be like this the whole time? And then it wasn't, and it was resolved so quickly, and the story continued to move along in the way that it needed to so quickly that that was the tiniest complaint that I thought of the entire time I was reading it, and then I didn't have another complaint the entire time. So take that with a grain of salt and understand that this still got a full star, and the book overall still got 5 stars for me. He consistently raises the stakes at an even pace, and there are a lot of moments in between those really high intensity plot points to allow for buildup of tension, of plot, for character growth. So he's really good at pacing those things out as well. And on that note, there is consistent buildup and payoff throughout with all those moments of character growth in between. And it's really what makes the heart of the story, I think, because it makes those catastrophic losses feel all the more catastrophic. It makes the victories feel all the more victorious because of the way that he paces those moments. And I was thinking about this book all the time when I wasn't reading it. And again, it is all of these elements working together that made me so compelled to read it. But an enormous piece of it really was that I just wanted to know what was going to happen next. So that's a testament to his skill with pacing, is that I wanted to know what was going to happen, and I just wanted to get back to it at all times. So overall thoughts, as I said, this was easily a 5 stars for me. I know that it won't necessarily be for everyone, but it checked all my boxes. It ended up being really significant to me. I loved it so much more than I was expecting to, and it's one where I can pretty easily say, these are all things that sound interesting to you. Yes, you should go read this book and check it out. Obviously, I'm still thinking about it, and it's one that I think I'm going to be thinking about for a long time, and one that I will continually return to as an example of wonderful science fiction writing that is both intense and smart while also being funny and uplifting, and in combining kind of those two sides of the spectrum so wonderfully. I'm gonna go ahead and move on to my spoiler-filled thoughts. I don't have as many here. I always say that and then I talk longer than I mean to, but again, just gonna go over a few points that I want to talk about more in depth that I didn't feel I could address in the spoiler-free thoughts. So I love the way that Weir characterizes women. The more that I've read over the years, that is something that has become really important to me over time, because there are even some of my favorite authors who I love them, but just like the way they present women isn't my favorite. It's not great. Sometimes they can do it okay and other times not, but I love the way he characterizes women. Every single female character on the page is unique, complex. They all feel distinguishable from each other. They all have their own unique strengths and goals and motivations and fears and weaknesses. And it's not necessarily that we're getting all this like in-depth characterization for each of them. It's just that each one of them is distinct, and the second they walk onto their page, you know them by name because they are this person. They never blend together. They all feel like their own unique person, and that's a big deal because it doesn't always happen. Anyone who reads a lot of fantasy and sci-fi will know that that's not the case. So he does a wonderful job of doing that. And even the fact that they're not ever over-sexualized. The only time that the sexualization of a woman was even present was with Johansson, and it was Mark making fun of her because he was like, you know, you're considered the hottest astronaut to ever come through NASA, but I know the truth. You're just a giant nerd. I think that's so funny, and it was not in a way where he was flirting with her. He was genuinely just teasing her as a friend. And so even that being the only element of sexualization present, the fact that it was just a joke, I love that that's the case in his writing, at least as far as I have read. And I can't get over the message of this book. It's so easy to assume that basic human instinct is survival for yourself, right? To put yourself first and to think like we live in this animal kingdom where we all behave like animals. And so the fact that this concept is presented where included in basic human instinct is the desire to help each other that's so beautiful. The way these people throw themselves through the ringer to try to bring Mark home, and not just because, the world is watching and it's their responsibility, but because they just genuinely want to see him come home safely. They want to help him. They care about him as a person, and it matters to them to be able to do this. The way they pour time and resources and money and their own physical and mental health just to do everything in their power that they can. The way they sacrifice so much just to bring him home. It's beautiful. The inherent value of life is such a present idea here. And again, with the general trend over the past, however long, I would need to study this more in depth, but with the trend of more speculative fiction being more gritty and dark and violent, I love seeing that there seems to be a new trend in more recent years of presenting goodness and hope and optimism, and the fact that humans are capable of goodness and that we want to be good and that we want to help. It's another reason why I love Murderbot. That was also super, we've got the epic sci-fi elements, but it at its heart was very just sweet and gentle and presented the idea of basic human goodness being inherent as well. Again, it's just human perseverance for the sake of someone else just really gets me in a way that not many other things do. And I'm realizing the older I get how important that is to me as a reader and as a writer. I think in the past I have said the theme of redemption is really significant to me, and it still is, but I think even more so. Any presentation of human capability for goodness and kindness, I think that is the lifeblood behind the things that I read and that I write. That is one of the most important elements of storytelling to me. And so that being present here, obviously it just blew that rating out of the water because it's so present here. And Project Hail Mary does this in its own way too, and I think that's why, again, I've come to really respect and admire Andy Weir as a writer, because this idea seems so central to his writing, and I love that. I think it's so important to present that message in a world where it is so easy to become discouraged and pessimistic and to think that people are all inherently evil and out to get you. And obviously, you got to be careful. People can be really bad, but also people can be really kind and lovely. And I love that we are celebrating that more in literature now. So yeah, I'm really appreciative that was the central idea and theme of this book, and that's what made it hit so hard for me and made me love it so much. And I was so sad when I finished this book, not because I was disappointed in the book itself, but because I didn't want it to end. Obviously, I was so satisfied with the ending, and I loved the way it all concluded, but I didn't want to be done yet. I missed Mark Watney. I wanted to know what he was up to and hear his thoughts about things, and I immediately went and watched the movie adaptation because I just wanted to hang out in the story a little longer. It's something that has lingered in my heart long after I put the book aside, and one that I know is going to continue to linger in my heart for a while. And it is a story that lingers because thematically I think it speaks to something in all of us. There's something there for everyone, because at its most basic, it's about our desire to help one another, which to me was very uplifting in a realistic way. It didn't feel like we were sugarcoating anything. It didn't feel like it was optimistic to the point of delusion. It felt like an honest look at the goodness and kindness humans are capable of, and said, look at how we just help each other. Look at how that happens. And again, I think that will resonate with everybody in one way or another. I know it did with me. A lot of this video I knew was just going to be me gushing about how much I loved it. I don't necessarily have anything super profound to say about it, but I just thought it was wonderful. And again, the fact that it's the only fiction book I've read this year that has received 5 stars from me, it's review worthy. So if you've not read The Martian, I hope this has encouraged you to check it out. And if you have read The Martian, I would love to discuss further with you. I really would love to have more conversations about this book. So feel free to start one in the comments below or elsewhere on my social media channels. Now, my next video should be my September update. I don't think I will have time for anything else in between, and I don't really plan on having anything else in between. So the plan will be to see you at the end of September for my writing update. As always, you can also find me on Instagram and Goodreads. Those links are below. And if you feel so inclined, you can also subscribe below. In the meantime, though, happy reading, happy writing, and I will chat with you all soon.